Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. Hope you've felt the inspiration, the comfort, the love that we have here in our shul. And the little breaks we take are really what we would do in shul. We'd walk around, we'd spend time talking. It's not just all prayer, it's a lot of getting together, which is the problem. That's why we can't do it. Because if we were only interested in having a minyan, if all we needed was the 10 people in proximity, well, we could probably figure out what to do. We could probably have rotating. If that's all we needed, there's a way around it. I mean, the rules haven't been relaxed yet, but once they are and they allow small groups, we could do that. But I don't think that's what we come here for. We don't come here strictly so we can have a minyan. We come here because we have each other. Today I want to share the story of the hunger of our times. This is not a hunger game. This is real. And it comes to us from two primary sources. The first story of hunger I want to talk about is the hunger for identity and the hunger for wealth, the hunger for love, the hunger for belonging, the hunger for security and safety. And it comes to us from the book of Ruth, which is traditionally read today on the book of Shavuot. And the book of Ruth is about a family that escapes the famine in the land of Israel by going to a neighboring country. And as happens, the family has handsome young men, and they meet beautiful young women. They happen to be princesses. And the short version of the story is that when it was time to return to the land, Elimelech, who was the father, his two sons had all died, and only returning to the land of Israel was Naomi and her now widowed daughter-in-law Ruth. And Ruth converts so she can be part of the Jewish people, despite the fact that when they left the land, they were nobility, they were princes of Judah, and when she returned, she was an outcast because she had abandoned her people. And subsequently, she was welcomed back, but her daughter-in-law, the foreigner, was not entirely welcomed until Boaz, a sage, welcomed her with marriage because he was part of the family, and that was his responsibility. And the story of the book of Ruth is one in which we learn about hunger, literally, in which people had to leave their homes to find food, but they had the capacity to do so, so they escaped. But there wasn't such a warm welcome when they returned. And in fact, they went through their own personal tragedies. And it's not a tale of today necessarily, but it does talk about people's unrest and the thought that maybe we could escape this, go away, hide out, segregate ourselves, which is what we have to do. But importantly, with the story of Ruth, we learn how to treat the convert. And when Ruth utters the words, "Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Where you die, I will die. I swear nothing but death will part us." That was her desire and willingness to give of herself entirely to belong to the people. And that is where we need to remind ourselves that anyone who chooses to belong to the Jewish people is entirely welcomed. There aren't two classes. But more importantly, for today, the message of the book of Ruth of hunger ends with the acceptance and love of the stranger. And that is the moment we are living in now. We are living in a moment of deep hunger. There's a hunger for all the things we can hardly express. They're so new because the loss of so much social intimacy and the distance that we've had to endure has begun to build stronger and stronger a hunger for something different than what we have now. And yet, it is the kindness of strangers and the empathy of those who accept others fully that are helping us get through a very, very difficult time. It is also the cruelty of those who highlight the other and mistreat them. And that goes on everywhere. Every one of you can probably tell me a story about someone who cruelly and rudely did not socially distance, or was rude, or selfish, or we know of something that went on that at this time is not acceptable. And the story of Ruth reminds us that out of hunger has to come love and compassion. This is why Ruth ultimately fathered the house of David, and generations hence, the king of Israel. The outsider becomes the prince, the princess, and the leader. The second story of hunger is a little bit different. It talks to the holiday, the festival of Shavuot, and the aspect that many of you are familiar with, in which our tradition is to eat dairy today. Why did Harbor Bakery have such a long socially distanced lineup? It went all the way from Harbor Bakery to Krispy Kreme donuts at Bathurst. Maybe not literally, but sort of. It was a long line, and my neighbors asked me, is this the dairy holiday? Because I saw everyone lined up. I think they were getting cheesecake. One of the boobies explained it to me, and I said, that's it. So why do we eat dairy on Shavuot? Well, there are many, many reasons. I once had the pleasure of discovering a document written by a rabbi friend of mine, which he gave 70 unique reasons for eating dairy on Shavuot. But of the very few that I remember or think are worth repeating, there are two that stand out. The first one is, it's summer. And if you were in an agricultural society in which the milk you bought came from a farm, which some of you may be doing that, you may be buying direct from a farm or a co-op, you might notice that the milk tastes different in the summer than it does in the winter. The way our milk system works now, so much milk is aggregated together into large tanks that are then distributed, you might not notice. But there was a time when, even as a child, we could tell the difference. And that is because the animals are being fed differently in the winter and in the summer. They're eating grass now, not hay. The milk is richer, more earthier, sweeter. To celebrate the oncoming festival of Shavuot, we start to prepare dairy, and we also prepare various fruits, but most importantly, it's a moment in which we can celebrate the season. Passover, spring; Shavuot, summer. And of course, accompanying that are all the good things that came with extra production of milk, butter, cheese, cream, and so on. Cheesecake is probably the number one food for Passover. But anything dairy will do. And of course, if you're lactose intolerant, have lactose free. And if you don't eat dairy, have fake. Doesn't matter. Just something to uplift your spirit and remind you of summer. The first part of hunger is the hunger for a connection to land and food. The second explanation for Shavuot is very interesting. Imagine you are at Sinai. Somehow place yourself around that mountain and imagine that you hear the words of the 10 Commandments and you say to Moses, hey, 10 Commandments, that's great. These are all really great ideas. Be good to your parents, keep the Shabbat, treat your neighbors respectfully, don't worship idols. Yeah, but practically speaking, what does this mean? Well, and then the laws start to come. And one of the laws that you get is, Remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Don't cook a goat in its mother's milk, which is a way of saying don't be cruel when it comes to the treatment of animals. But it's also a way of saying don't eat milk and meat together. So Moses announces a new law. No milk and meat together. And there's a huge collective groan from everyone in which they realize now that all their pots will have to be koshered. Everything is treif. They have to redo it. They have to have separate dishes. And you could just imagine the hullabaloo that went on here. The lobbying by the dish companies, who knows? So there you end up with a people who have just received the Ten Commandments, and the derivative of the laws start to include food, milk and meat. Well, we all know that if you follow the law of kosher meat, it takes time. It takes work. You have to sharpen your knife just so. The animal has to be killed just so. It has to be salted. It has to be washed. It has to be rinsed. It has to be salted. It has to be deveined. It has to be defatted. It has to be, before you know it, 72 hours can go by before you can eat meat, even if you kill it kosher. But milk, no restrictions. If it's from a kosher animal, you can eat it. So they switched to dairy. This is the way in which we tell the story of what it's like to get a whole new set of laws and how we adapt to those laws in an instant because everything in our life has changed. We used to be able to eat cheeseburgers. Now we can eat either cheese or burgers. We can't have them together, and you can't have the same dishes, and now you need 2 sinks, and before you need 2 stoves and 2 ovens and 2 fridges and 2 houses. When life changes in an instant, we adapt. And instead of going hungry on Shavuot and saying, well, everything we have is not kosher because it's milk and meat mixed together, we adapted. And we started eating dairy until we had enough time to kosher our kitchen. Now, I'm not saying that's the real story, but it's a retelling of something really deep and important. And what's really deep and important is that sometimes the rules change in an instant. And you adapt or you starve. And we're adapting. But some people are starving. And it's not a hunger just for food. I would say that most people today, under the pandemic, can get food. Some might not get enough. There are children who are probably not getting enough nutrition. But I think there are other hungers that are unmet. The hunger for mental health support, the hunger for domestic abuse support, the hunger for security in life, the hunger for what we all want, which is some form of serenity. Those are not being met. And as time goes on, and we start to talk about reopening, and it's coming, and then it's delayed, and it's coming, and it's delayed, and then we're going to open Kingston because they have no cases, but Toronto will continue to be on lockdown. But you can't go from Toronto to Kingston because then you'll cause a new outbreak. It's going to start to get even more and more difficult to be where you are and be in lockdown, and the hunger will continue to grow. And what happens when it's over? So I want to share with you 3 verses in the prophets. Now, I always say, don't run away. I'm not going to Bible thump here. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to stick the COVID-19 into the Bible and prove that the Bible was talking about today. No, I'm not doing that. I'm taking a great book of literature, a literary classic, the Bible, which has stood the test of time, and I want to apply the idea to today, not today to the idea. So the first one I want to share with you is from the book of Isaiah. And all these phrases start with a powerful phrasing which goes, Hine yamim ba'im. Behold, days are coming. We are living in a time in which I keep thinking to myself, days are coming. I don't know what comes after that, and that's why I'm sharing this with you today. So Isaiah says to Hezekiah, the king, days are coming when everything in your home, which your ancestors stored up, he's the king, his home is the palace, and that which his ancestors stored up is a tremendous treasure. All the treasures of monarchy. Everything in your home that your ancestors worked so hard to store up will be carried off to Babylon, and nothing will be left. Well, we all have homes, or we all have places in which we live. We all have stuff. We all have savings, or not. We all thought we had our lives in some space that was real and responsible and maybe ideal. It's all changed. All the things, the days have come in which everything in our home, and I mean home conceptually, is vulnerable. We thought we had our children enrolled in a good school. Sure, they're enrolled in a good school. They're just not going. They're still learning, but we don't have a teacher taking care of them. It's us, or in my case, my wife. We thought we had savings. We're dipping into them because we got to pay our bills. And we're not getting paid what we used to. We're paying out for cars that we're not driving. We're paying for houses or cottages we're not using. We're making commitments to camp, and some refunds come and some refunds don't. And what are we going to do? And all the plans we had, they're all on hold. All those weddings and all the events, they're all on hold. Everything that was in our house has proven itself to be temporary. It's all at risk. Whatever formed our sense of domestic security is at risk. We used to be able to go to synagogue, to movies, to restaurants, friends, family, children. All gone. And we don't know how long it will be gone for. Days are coming in which everything we have will be at risk. The second text I'd like to share is from Amos, the prophet Amos, who says, Hine yamim ba'im, a time is coming. Days are coming when the plowman will meet up with the reaper, and the treader of grapes with the seed carrier. So what does this mean? It means that the agricultural bounty of the land will be so great that the man or woman who are plowing the field will be meeting the person who is cutting the wheat, because it's so fertile that you're already plowing and it's already growing, and it's growing so quickly. So the plowman meets the reaper. It's not an ominous thought, it's a bountiful thought. And the one who is treading grapes, they're just harvesting the grapes, and they're treading them to extract the wine, as they do with their feet. And who should be coming along? They're planting already. What? We just harvest. They're so fertile, we can't wait. And the hills will drip with sweet wine. Such a beautiful image in which the bounty is so great, there is no time to rest. Because as soon as you plow, you grow. And as soon as you grow, you harvest. As soon as you harvest, you grow. Extraordinary. I also see that verse in a way that I don't think was ever contemplated by the writer of that text or those who have read this text for over 2,000 years. Because today, the plowman and the reaper and the treader of grapes and the carrier of seed would not meet up. They'd socially distance. Days are coming in which they would want to bump into each other, but they could not. Because the bounty of the earth has not changed. But the capacity we have for intimacy has changed dramatically. We are no longer able to bump into each other safely. And when I think of this verse, and I think of the powerful image of the plowman and the reaper, and often the reaper is used in negative terms like the grim reaper. In this case, it's designed to be something to give us a sense of optimism and hope, and yet, in fulfillment of this verse, they couldn't meet up. I'm thinking about all the times and things in our lives today that are still shockingly beyond our reach. The simplest things. Hopefully they won't be here for much longer. But I will tell you that Shavuot does celebrate the temporary. It does ask us to take into account where we really are today. And when they suddenly could not eat meat, they switched to dairy. They celebrated the temporariness of their lives, which is what we need to do in order to get through. We have to celebrate it. And I know many of you have told me there are many ways in which you are taking advantage of this time, whether you're going through your stuff, or you're gardening, or you're reaching out to people, or you're doing kindness, extraordinary things, or you're figuring out what's wrong in your life and you're trying to fix it, or you're looking for online courses, or you're taking master classes, or you're studying Torah. Whatever you're doing, you're celebrating the temporary. Shavuot celebrates the temporary. That little flash in which we go from spring to summer, in which we remind ourselves that even though life was difficult, at the flick of a switch, we overcame. Now, the third text of Days Are Coming. And this is what inspired me to think about this. Song by Shlomo Carlebach. Hinei yamim ba'im ni'um Hashem. Behold, days are coming. And the Lord declares, I will send a hunger, a famine into the land. But no, it will not be a hunger for bread. And it will not be a thirst for water. It will be a hunger for hearing God's word. Now, I grew up with this text, and it's a beautiful song, and it's very powerful. The idea that the world will not be in suffering, that everyone will have adequate sustenance, there will be no hurt, and suddenly the world will wake up to the idea that there's something beyond food and beyond water, and there will be a thirst for the Word of God, which is a way of talking about knowledge. But now, when I think of that text, I start to ask myself, what happens to this hunger? It's an undefined hunger for something different than where we are now. We obviously have talked a lot about the new normal, that we're still waiting for something. We know what we don't want, or we've thought about it. We know what we do want, but we're not sure how we're going to get there. And when we actually get there, I feel that there's a hunger, and it's coming. And it's a hunger for meaningfulness, a hunger for something so real, A hunger in which we will not tolerate just being given food and water, because we will turn and we will say, we're not hungry. We're not thirsty. We're starving for love. We're starving for knowledge. We're starving for intimacy. We're starving for stability. We're starving for education. We're starving for regularity. We're starving to have a routine. We're starving to be able to touch, to feel, to hug. We are starving. It is very hard to come here every week and talk to a camera. And I know that I speak with many of you and for many of you when I say that we can achieve incredibly important things this way. We can talk, we can feel, we can think, we can motivate, we can act, we can design, we can imagine, but we can't connect the way we want to. And it is hard. And we don't talk about that every week. But on Yizkor Day, we should. Because the hunger that we feel is the same hunger you feel when you've lost a loved one. It is unsatisfiable. It can never be filled up. At this time and this moment, nothing could ever make me feel connected like seeing everybody. But we celebrate the temporary. We celebrate when the rules change. We find a way to have a holiday about the fact that we were blindsided by the law. We find a way to celebrate the fact that life is temporary. We find a way to make meaning of the fact that days are coming and we don't know what's next. Days are coming in which we will lose what we have. Days are coming in which we will want to connect, but we can't. But days are also coming in which we will finally acknowledge that we have good lives. We just want something better. The hunger for love, the hunger for memory, is different than the hunger for food. We have to do our part to make sure everybody is taken care of in their body. And the hunger for the soul, may that continue and motivate us to do great things with our lives. Because days are coming in which you will be asking yourself the existential question once again. Now that I've been through this, what am I hungry for? And how do I get it? And how do I make sure I share it with the world? Days are coming. Stay hungry, my friends. Stay hungry. Do good things. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be with you every week. Hopefully in person soon.